From Uncle Dana's harsh criticism of Ngannou following UFC 226 to White claiming that the Predator's PFL deal makes no sense, this is everything you need to know about the UFC president's beef with Francis. Let's kick things off with White's comments about Ngannou in 2018. Believe it or not, the Predator and Dana actually got along at first because of how talented the Cameroonian is. After destroying Andrei Arlovski and Alistair Overeem in 2017, White gave him a shot at the UFC Heavyweight Championship at UFC 220. But the fight didn't go as planned for Francis, as Stipe Miocic absolutely dominated him. Everyone was disappointed with the one-sided bout, especially Uncle Dana. Then, things only went from bad to worse after Ngannou lost to Derek Lewis at UFC 226. After rising through the ranks of the heavyweight division, Francis found himself sitting on back-to-back losses. And then White completely switched up on him as the UFC was about to cut ties with Francis. Following the Predator's loss to the Black Beast, White publicly accused the Cameroonian of having a huge ego and claimed that Ngannou only lost twice in a row because he let his meteoric rise get to his head. But he didn't stop there. In fact, Dana went on to say that he, along with many others, have seen the Predator's ego on full display, calling it out of control. White also highlighted that instead of going straight to training camp after defeating the Demolition Man, Francis went off to France, even though there were only 7 weeks between the Alistair and Stipe fights. According to a YouTube video posted by the Predator in December 2022, this was the moment that soured his relationship with the UFC president. And unfortunately, their relationship only got worse as time went on, especially because White took forever to give Ngannou another title shot. So after putting on 2 of the worst performances of his career, all eyes were on the Predator when he faced off against Curtis Blaydes. Even though the Cameroonian was the underdog, he absolutely demolished Blaydes within 45 seconds. And before anyone knew it, Francis looked like a lethal fighter once again. Following his clash with Curtis, the Predator racked up 3 more KO victories against guys like Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, and even Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Francis looked unstoppable. And of course, he wanted another chance at the title because of how many heavyweights he took out with ease. But the UFC didn't give him what he wanted. Why? Well, they were too focused on giving fans the trilogy fight between Stipe and Daniel Cormier. So Ngannou only fought once in 2020. Naturally, he was upset with Dana because he'd taken out 4 of the best fighters in the division, yet he was being treated as if he was still on a losing streak. But then at UFC 260, the Predator finally got a second chance at the title, and boy did he impress the MMA world. Besides becoming the heavyweight champ, he also avenged his loss to Stipe by knocking him out in the second round. Francis was on top of the world, and it seemed as if Francis and White's relationship was going to be okay, but that didn't last very long. In fact, everything came crashing down later in 2021. Soon after Francis captured the heavyweight championship, the Cameroonian was set to have his first title defense against the man himself, Derek Lewis. This would have been the perfect opportunity for the Predator to right one of the biggest wrongs of his career. But sadly, the fight didn't even happen. The issue was that White wanted the fight to happen in August 2021 at UFC 265, while Francis wanted the bout to take place towards the end of September that same year. Instead of respecting his heavyweight champ and waiting a month, Dana went ahead and scheduled a matchup between Cyril Garn and the Black Beast for the interim title. Ngannou and most fight fans thought this was ridiculous. I mean, he'd only held on to the title for a few months at that point, so there was no need for White to make such a move. Then, Francis made matters worse by expressing his unhappiness with fighter pay. Everyone knows that the easiest way to annoy the heck out of Uncle Dana is to bring up the low sums UFC fighters earn. So when Francis did this, it spelled disaster for his relationship with the UFC president. It all started when it was reported that Logan Paul earned over $20 million from his fight with Mayweather. Ngannou couldn't believe it, since UFC world champs like himself barely make that much during their entire career. So he expressed his frustration on Twitter and asked fight fans, "What are we doing wrong?" What's more, in October 2021, Francis admitted that he had to borrow money for his training camps and hinted at making a switch to boxing so that he could live a more comfortable life. Following his successful title defense at UFC 270, the Predator only got increasingly upset about the lack of money he was earning. So in 2022, he said that the days of him fighting for $500,000 or $600,000 are done, and yet White showed no willingness to pay him what he wanted. Plus, he wanted to go the McGregor route and earn a massive paycheck by boxing another star, but the UFC president wasn't willing to do that. Not to mention, when Francis appeared on an episode of the PBD podcast in April 2022, he slammed the UFC, saying that they let you pretend that you're negotiating. By the time January 2023 rolled around the corner, tensions between both men reached an all-time high. So Ngannou decided to leave the UFC. After lengthy contract negotiations, Francis gave up on the promotion and walked out on them. And of course, this left White fuming, especially because he felt as if the company did everything it could to keep the Predator happy. While speaking to the media at the UFC Vegas 67 press conference, Dana said that the promotion offered Ngannou a deal that would have made him the highest-paid heavyweight of all time. But he rejected the deal. The UFC president then criticized the former champ, claiming that he doesn't want to take risks and instead wants to fight lesser opponents for more money. Here's the thing though, while Francis obviously wanted more money, that wasn't the only reason he walked away from the promotion. When Francis appeared on the MMA Hour in January 2023, he told Ariel Helwani that he asked the company for 3 things besides increased pay, and all of them were for the betterment of his fellow UFC fighters. During negotiations with the promotion, Francis asked for fighters to have sponsorship rights, free health insurance, and an advocate to represent them in board meetings. The former champ told Ariel that he wasn't expecting each of his requests to be accepted, but at the very least, he was hoping for the company to show some willingness to reach a compromise. Instead, they said that they couldn't give him any of the things he wanted. Plus, they told Francis that he can easily pay for his own health insurance, but as he pointed out, the fighters at the bottom can't because of their meager paychecks. On top of that, Francis claimed that he felt like Dana was secretly listening in on his negotiations with Hunter Campbell, the UFC's executive vice president. Then, while talking about Dana's comments at the UFC Vegas 67 press conference, the Predator told Helwani that he couldn't care less about what White had to say and said that the UFC's president's words will never hurt him because he's heard a lot worse. Following the drama of Francis's departure, things settled down for a bit, but after Ngannou signed with the PFL, Dana started firing shots again. During the UFC Vegas 73 post-fight press conference, White was asked about his thoughts on the Predator's move to the PFL, and he only had bad things to say about the deal. The deal allows Francis to train for a boxing match that'll be held in 2023, while he'll fight MMA bouts for the promotion in 2024. According to Dana, this makes no sense because they're paying him even though he won't fight for the PFL until 2024. He also repeated his comments from January 2023 and claimed that Francis is ducking Jon Jones because he doesn't want to take any risks. But of course, Francis wasn't going to let White get away with his comments, so he wasted no time and clapped back at the UFC president. The former champ responded to Dana's comments on Twitter and called him out for all of the claims he made during the press conference. Francis highlighted how he takes risks since he accepted the fight with Garn despite dealing with a terrible knee injury. Besides that, the Predator said that he's finally getting the money and respect he's wanted for a while, so he asked Dana, "Why are you so against me being free and happy?" Valid point. So, from White claiming that the Predator's PFL deal makes no sense, to Uncle Dana's harsh criticism of Francis following UFC 226, this was everything you needed to know about the UFC president's beef with Francis.